Hark the bardic paladin, who sings and plays again. He tells the tales of glory, and weaves a magic story. He'll join you at your table, and ask you to share a fable. Heroes of humble origin, villains who must be fought again. No matter their skill or prowess, the people in life are countless. So we pray you heed our request. Enjoy this tale of sidekicks and side quests.
Episode 144, Thalara Solanis and the Almiraj Lodge. Welcome to Sidekicks and Side Quests, the Dungeons & Dragons podcast that helps to put humans back into humanity and breathe life into your campaign NPCs with backstory and bravado. That's right, we're building a world, one character at a time. I am your host, Kurt Krenwelge, the Bardic Paladin, and I'll be joining Eating the Dungeons table in the Levitating Platter. Another exciting episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests, the best unofficial Dungeons & Dragons podcast, in my humbly biased opinion. I've got an awesome guest for you this week. Some may say he is the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop. I don't know if that's Macho Man Randy Savage or not, but anyway, here we're off to a great start here at the top of season 6 for our February episode. Before I rattle and prattle on too long and tease this out too much without fanfare, let me go ahead and lead you into our first ad read. This episode is brought to you by Plus One EXP and their brand new RPG Zine Club. Zine Club is a monthly membership subscription service featuring fresh zines from emerging and expanding creators across the globe. It's our way of inviting GMs, players, and zine lovers everywhere to invest more intentionally in the creative community. It's crowdsourced support without crowdfunding. So this service offers monthly releases that they put out in 2 20 to 44 page saddle stitch zines, 3 different flavors. Take your pick from story zines, adventure zines, and all of the zines. You can pick your format of print and digital, or just get digital only for your favorite titles. Join the Clubhouse Discord section of the Plus One EXP community on Discord. Get the best prices guaranteed from your subscription that you're going to get each month. You get a private subscription portal where you can manage your subscription, add products, or change your information. Change your frequency monthly, every other month, something else. You pick how often you want these new titles to arrive. You only get what you want. And if you miss a month, why, you can always go back and add a title to your recent month's order. Get an annual surprise each February after your first anniversary. Get access to special content with interviews, how to play videos, special content for Zine Club titles. Get a free pizza if you fill out one of the RPG Zine Club passports, or redeem it for a free pizza at events where Tony is present himself. You're going to get access to new and known designers, the best voices from across the RPG design community. And know that Plus One EXP and RPG Zine Club curate their zines based on community interest and feedback to help you discover your new favorite creators. There's a DIE focus because Plus One is committed to championing diversity, inclusion, and equity in their projects. Creators with diverse experiences make our community better. So Zine Club prioritizes creating equity for all of our creators. And it's more than a purchase. Your subscriptions will let us invest more heavily in our print partners and provide them with potentially life-changing support by consolidating scores or hundreds of purchases as the club grows. So, if you want to learn more, I would recommend that you go to the website rpgzine.club. Again, rpgzine.club. And if you want, go to plus1exp.com. And when you're buying stuff on that site, beard balms or lip balms or beard RPGs or whatnot, and you need a discount code at checkout, be sure to use the code Randolph, RANDOLPH, at checkout and get some savings on your purchase at no extra cost to you. Again, website is plus1exp.com, and the Zine Club website is rpgzine.club. All right. And without further ado, I turn the microphone over to my guest and I ask, hello, mystery contestant. Would you care to introduce yourself? Tell us who it is that you are and what is it that you do?
Yeah, so my name is Marcus, and I run the channel Eating the Dungeon. It started as a few Reddit posts many years back, actually, specifically just asking the question of how do you prepare certain monsters in D&D. I had a party that I was DMing for at the time, and the question came up, as many DMs run into, of, hey, this awesome campaign you ran? How about instead of that, we start a restaurant? And then the next about 6 years of my life developed into this project that is chronicling the culinary analyses of plenty of the monsters in D&D, in addition to the culinary trends, cultural analyses, and economic aspects that go into what makes a food culture in a fantasy realm. So that's been my passion project for the past few years now.
Interesting. I'm now suddenly inspired because I've been doing these parlays at the platter panel style episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And since we've had previous guest chef Mike Harris on the podcast, now I'm kind of inspired to be like, let's do like a food panel and like
Good.
we talk about like eating monsters and like, food in D&D. I think that would be so interesting because did it involve like actually doing like legitimate like food science
Mm-hmm.
research into figuring out like,
Yeah.
okay, if this monster like lives in this environment, what kind of textures or gaminess can you expect in the meat and stuff like that?
Yeah, so all of my write ups are really focused on an actual real world analysis of beasts that don't exist. So
Right.
thinking about, the physical ramifications of, for example, right now I'm finishing up the long form video on the Catoblepus.
Mm.
So you have this toxic monster that lives in a marshy swamp waste. What would that do to the meat? What would be necessary for preparation? What would the flavors that develop from that kind of lifestyle look like? And so looking at all those things, because it's easy to just be like, oh, flump marshmallows, you know.
Hmm.
But this is going a little bit further on, and sometimes to an overly further level. It's easy to get caught in the weeds there.
Hmm.
But it is a lot of fun. We've built up a small community as well of other individuals who ask these same questions, and we get into some pretty heated debates of, no, this is actually what Orok would taste like if you look at this source material. And it's funny because there's so much D&D source material out there, but
Yeah.
there's very, very little of this. So there's a lot of room for homebrewing.
Yeah, true. I'm reminded of the viral, maybe it was like a meme sort of a post where someone was like, "Oh, I'm a curator at a museum, at a natural history museum, and we get all kinds of interesting questions from the guests who come through." And had a man ask the question of, "What? How would a T-Rex taste?"
Mm-hmm.
And they went to the paleontologist who did the back and forth, and they were like, "Well, based on all the heavy metals present at that time, if you were to eat a T-Rex, you would die." And then they told the guy who then sent them like a drawing of him and his buddies eating a T-Rex, but they all had little X's in their eyes because they were like, it was a really good eat, but like we're
Yeah.
all dead because of the lethality of the toxic metals in the meat or whatever.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's where part of this comes in too. Because if we're being completely honest, for most of the monsters, don't. The answer is how do you eat this? Don't. But then there you also have to have how do we make this work for the intrepid party that will? Because all party members are risk takers of some type. So usually
Sure.
there is a lot of things of considerations of the usage of lesser restoration, the usage of purified food and water, the usage of different sorts of maybe you need to cast something to get rid of a curse first,
Ooh.
whatever things would make that, and that's where the interplay comes in,
Mhm.
because it's more than just a completely realistic analysis, but also where does the fantastical come into play there.
Sure, of course. Yeah. Oh man, I was just thinking or just reminded of because I happen to have enjoyed the issues of Arcadia from MCDM Productions, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
say that one of their issues, they did have something that was called like the Pickling Guild that
Mm-hmm.
sort of played with the idea of
Mm-hmm.
like it was like a spy sort of a network, but they were also like really invested in food. I don't know if that particular write up went into the same sorts of depths of things that you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like that's like a good synergy of resources. Again,
Oh
like
yeah.
saying, you've been doing this on Reddit for so long, so you've yeah, you probably got some like high
Yeah.
rated, check marked, saved, favorited posts and stuff like that.
There's plenty of good stuff out there. I actually collaborated with another creator called Codex of Strings, Ariadne's Codex of Strings. They put out a bunch of great supplemental material. I wrote one of the recipes for one of their books. I reached out to them. They made awesome stuff. They'd reach out to me. And then I made a video on one of the other ones from theirs that they had written up. And it is fun doing this because everyone has a different style. You know,
Mhm.
I'm much more of the like, let's look at the actual on the ground, realistic as fantasy can get kind of analyses. And theirs was more along the lines of like fantastical, like beholder sashimi kind of
Mm.
stuff. Like just stuff that, and their artwork's amazing. So that kind of stuff is really fun as well. And so it's always just fun to see different people's takes on these type of topics.
Well, you say beholder's sashimi, and I feel like I would be doing a big disservice if I didn't give a shout out to our previous guest, Travis Frederick, who was the inventor behind Binwick, the Death Tyrant
Mm.
Beholder Chef. Who, because of that episode, in my homebrew world, there's like a inter realm, a multiple dimensional organization that exists. They go by different names. Like I think in the Feywild in the campaign that
Mhm.
I'm running, they nickname them the Iron Chefs. And I think in the Astral Sea they nickname them the Rue, but they're called like I think culinary the Cantu Culinari I think is their official name. But
Okay.
the idea is like they're the chefs of the multi well not no, not necessarily multiverse, but at least within the context of the realms of
Yeah.
the universe I'm playing in, and they have like interdimensional recipes and stuff like
Hmm.
that have been collated and put all together, and they have like this immense wealth of knowledge and being able to do these recipes, but they're also like really beholden to them.
Hmm.
And so if they don't follow the recipes exactly precisely how they're made or meant to be done, then they could potentially get expelled or lose all their privileges and stuff like that because you went off book, you didn't follow
Hmm.
the recipe.
I like
So it's
that.
yeah, so it's kind of interesting now because of that, and bringing all this into the forefront of my mind. This was like, oh, I saw your stuff on Instagram, especially like you were alluding to the cattle bus cattle. I
Catablepis. Don't even
Catoblepas.
attempt because everyone's going to tell you you're wrong no matter how you pronounce it.
Right.
Catablepis, Catoblepis, every different way I've pronounced it, there's been someone saying you're saying it wrong. So,
Yeah.
however comes naturally to you, you'll be wrong regardless, I promise.
So that one, and then the on keg videos, and then something that we're going to use here later at NPC creation. You also, I saw your reels and videos of your supplement that you've developed for the
Mhm.
2024 rules of 5e with your own Bastion download that you can get, right?
Yes, that was a lot of fun to make. I joke in that video in that write up that the bastions are awesome. They're something that people have been wanting more of in D&D. With Matt Colville, strongholds and
Oh yeah,
followers, all that
I
kind of
think that
stuff.
was the catalyst for this. I
Yeah,
think they
definitely.
saw that and they were like, "Oh, he's using old rules. Well, we should bring those back and figure out
Yeah.
some way." Yeah.
And not to break anyone who like follows me's heart if they think I'm a D&D purist. I play plenty of different TTRPGs and played other ones with, more of that focus on development. So I'm glad that there's more of this in 2024 D&D. I think there's been lot of great changes, but there was
Mhm.
one rule, there was one line in the Bastion write up that says kitchens are not special facilities or basic facilities. And that means that kitchens mechanically, or a bastion with a kitchen is mechanically the same as a bastion without one. And I'm like, okay, you're just calling me out in particular. I'm
Mm.
like, a kitchen completely makes or breaks it. And I get it, mechanics wise and that kind of stuff changes it. But then I was like, well, what if someone wants to utilize the bastion system specifically for developing a restaurant, for creating some sort of area where they can serve food, whether that's to friends and family, whether that's to the general public. And so then that kind of just spiraled out of control, which was awesome because it's a way that I was more easily to integrate another rule set that I already had made on like a bigger scale with a lot more focus into the current rules. So
Mhm.
that was a lot of fun to make, and I'm already like iterating on it. That's one of my biggest issues is I need to like just drop a project. It's hard to be like, I'm done. I have too many things in the pipeline, but I always want to keep on like fixing and iterating.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly excited to dive more into it when we get to that part of the show. But you said something that I think is a perfect segue and lead into our next question. Do you currently or have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons before?
Yes, if anyone could guess here, I have played it once or twice. No, actually, not to date myself, but I've been playing for about 15 years now. So I got into it actually. My dad is an OG Dungeons and Dragons player. Like when he was a kid,
Ooh,
he got into first edition Dungeons and Dragons,
wow,
and he has a friend group that like still plays second edition D&D.
wow.
And
Okay.
so I've been trying to convince him to move up editions for a while now, and that they play second edition. And so I
Mm,
actually started playing second edition D&D when I first started out with him. But I've played plenty of other editions as well. 5e is what I've done the most time in, and then I've DM'd other games. The other big one that I DM for is Cyberpunk. I
okay.
really enjoy that, and it gives me two sides of different things. If I'm wanting more of the fantastical, if I'm wanting more of the Ocean's 11, I get the other side. But yeah, I've been DMing for a good while now. I think in those 15 years, I have been a forever DM for about 13 of them. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, I know that I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. First time ever was Halloween night of 2010. So
mhm.
that's how long I've been playing. So I came up on my 14th anniversary just this past Halloween. So I started in fourth edition and then made the switch into fifth. And I was like, oh, this is very cool. It feels very familiar with what I was doing, but now it feels like old school classic
Yeah.
kind of a way. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, that's I like it. So I think, and I would hope that you said you started off in 2E, but maybe eventually, now with this whole thing that you've published, maybe you can
Mhm.
finally convince your dad to play, and he and his friends will want to open up their own restaurant.
Hopefully, we'll see. They do play very different types of campaigns than I do. They're the old school, like generating the heroes of myth and legend to end up like running, countries and everything. Which
Okay.
is it's an interesting thing to see, like how D&D has developed the narrative structure over time of like
Mhm.
what is it about, kind of thing. When you go back to original D&D campaigns compared to a lot of new stuff. And I don't think one's better than the other. It's just any DM will say that the right table is just people who want to do the same thing, and making sure that you're catering to that, making sure that you as a DM are having fun too.
Mhm.
So whatever it is, just making sure that everyone's having fun. If it's running a restaurant, if it's being the protectors of the realm, if it's, I don't know, a fetch quest to collect chickens, if you're just all really into it, whatever it is, as long as you're really into it, you'll have a lot of fun.
Yeah. And this show is called Sidekicks and Side Quests. So the first part of these questions: who happens to be your favorite NPC or sidekick character, whether they be from one of the many games you've played in, a video game, movie, film, television, etc.? And why is this character your favorite NPC or sidekick?
Sidekick. If I'm gonna go for all-time favorite sidekick, it has to be Samwise Gamgee, obviously. But if we're gonna go
Mm.
for just general NPCs, um, okay, so in RuneScape, which if anyone out here knows RuneScape, shout out OSRS, there is a bunch of trolls, and these trolls have like a running gimmick that the trolls are you're named after the first thing you ate as a child,
Huh.
or as a troll child.
Okay.
And so they're just a hilarious little set of NPCs to like run across in the world, because you'll like hover over them and you'll see names like burnt meat or my arm. Like the troll ate its own arm, so its name is my arm, kind of stuff. And it's just a funny little gimmick of like, boulder. Okay, that troll ate a boulder. It's probably big and powerful. Or
Mm.
like pebble, so that's probably my favorite, just general set of NPCs, because they're just so funny to run across in the world, and they're a bunch of like little jokes that the developers put into the game for you to encounter.
Is that how you run trolls in your game?
I haven't completely stolen that, but honestly, I might. Yeah, I haven't. The party hasn't encountered too many trolls recently, so maybe the next one they run into, I'll sneak that in.
Well, with your supplement and your investment in knowing all this food culture of your world, it'd be kind of interesting to run into a troll named like Fondue or Omelette du Fromage or
Yeah,
something
just like
like
a
that.
clan of culinarian trolls, completely bucking the norm of, oh yeah, they'll just eat anything under a bridge. Now these ones are picky.
It's like I am truffle sauce.
Yeah.
It's like Oh, you're like a fancy troll. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like that idea. I'm stealing that.
There you go. That's the joy of this podcast is that we come up with great ideas, and I just give them
Mhm.
away from free
Yeah.
because I just want people to have more fun and to laugh and have some humor in their life. So excellent. And now with the other side of the namesake of this show, what happens to be your favorite side quest? Whether it happens to be, again, one of your many games you've played in, a video game, a movie, a film, a television show, a play, a piece of literature, etc. And why is this side quest or B plot element your favorite?
Um, Favorite side quest. There's one from Cyberpunk, the video game, that really stood out to me. I've been a big Cyberpunk fan for a good long while, just from the TTRPG. So when the video game came out, I was very excited.
Yeah.
And one Cyberpunk side quest, there's a side quest where you're helping like this dude who's running for mayor. I think the
Okay.
side quest name is called Dream On. And basically, you're finding out that things have been going weird in their apartment and they aren't exactly sure why, and like you're a detective pretty much through this of like trying to figure out what it is and figuring out that certain memories they have don't match up with other ones.
Mm.
And so basically you find out that they're gradually being like gang stalked and like manipulated by this organization that's trying to like sway the election.
So it's a
um,
real Manchurian candidate sort of situation.
Exactly. And
Mm.
it definitely is one of those that is, it kind of gets into your skin of like, obviously this is fiction, but like how much could be done just for you to like mistrust your own memory? Like, I'm obviously not running for like the mayor of Night City, so I don't think anyone really cares. But how easily it would be for these tiny things to just not match up in your memory and really make you like lose it. And it was just a nice like change in pace, I guess, from a lot of the other ones. The tone is completely different. I mean, the tone of Night City is always pretty dark, but the tone of like how you approach it, it's very like old school Columbo style, collecting information kind of thing. So I loved that one. That was a good one. The second guess would have to be the Wabbajack, uh, the Wabbajack side quest you get in Skyrim, where you have to go into that dude's mind and then basically like it's some straight up Psychonaut stuff of like use this weird chaos magic and everything to make him like overcome his demons, and you get this crazy Daedric like wand at the end of it. So that
Mm.
one's also fun just for like how cerebral and random it is.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I know I was in college when Skyrim came out.
Mm-hmm.
So I had roommates that disappeared when that game came out for lengths of time. And my wife loves that game and I got her the the complete, version of it for the Xbox One. But admittedly, I've never sat down to play Skyrim. It seems like it's I mean I know it seems like it's the perfect evergreen
Mm-hmm.
RPG game to play like any of the questionable as far as like maybe some of the other Bethesda titles,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I'm still partial to Fallout. But yeah, it just seems kind of like, oh yeah, Skyrim. It's like evergreen and it just seems so vast and full of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's like I didn't even know about this, but okay, you get to go into somebody's mind and you get to
Yeah.
get a super OP wand at the end of it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, once again, I think my favorite ones are anything that like kicks the norm of whatever's going on in the story. Something that really stands out because it's just so out of place. And sometimes you might like think of out of place as like, oh, that shouldn't fit there. But like to me, that's what's memorable.
Mhm.
That's what keeps the players talking afterwards of, oh yeah, that just really stuck out.
Yeah. And then, Marcus, the way that we end the personal interview section of the show, we ask the question, what are you passionate about and why?
Yeah. So for me, that's an easy answer. It's culinary ethnography. And so culinary ethnography is basically the study of the trends of food culture at a higher level than just like the individual, you know? And that's also the difficulty of like the work that I do for the cultural analyses is it's treading the line. You don't want to be doing generalization, but there are overarching factors that lead to whatever food is consumed by a cultural group. And this is the case in the real world, not just fantasy.
Mhm.
What is the economic implications? What are the cultural, the geographic implications, the topographical implications, the climate implications? Like, why were certain things grown in a specific place? Why did a specific community gravitate towards something? What cultural interchange needed to happen for one, good to end up somewhere else? We think of Italian food as always being like having tomato sauce as a key component.
Mhm.
But if you really think about it, that's a post-colonial good.
Yeah, that's
So
from the
a
New
lot of
World.
food doesn't go back that far. A lot of food is constantly being iterated on for all kinds of social reasons.
Mm.
And so I like looking at that, whether that's in the real world or in fantasy societies as well, and trying to like extrapolate that. And so that's really where I like lose myself just for hours and hours, is writing and developing those kind of questions, both for, fantasy settings, but also for real world things. My background, I'm Mexican, and so for me, a big thing is just looking back at the pre-colonial, post-colonial, development of Mexican food, and
Yeah.
even just something as simple as like what goes into a taco, not just the physical aspect of like meat
Mhm.
and bean or meat on a tortilla with cilantro and onion or whatever you want to put on it.
Mhm.
Personally, that's a completely regional thing,
Yeah.
but like the social structures that are necessary.
Mm.
I saw a really good speech by a university professor a little while back. I'll see if I can find it later. But he had a really good paper on what is a taco, and it was basically the idea is that it's not a taxonomical question of what ingredients are necessary, but more of like the social structures that are necessary for that kind of food to develop. Because a taco isn't a burrito or tamale. It's not designed for transport, like those are. Like masa with meat, that's an old thing. Like
Mhm.
burritos, tamales, we have very, very far back, records of that. But tacos are actually much more recent if you think about it. They're something that needs the industrial portion for there to be a standardized meal time, and there to be taqueros who are out and about in the city who are like selling these things close. But it's also not a sit down meal. It's not
Mhm.
something that way. So it's like this weird ephemeral state. So those are the kind of like really over the top questions that I get into, is culinary ethnography, like what are all of the aspects that lead to the development of a food.
Well, I'm here in Texas, so I mean, I know, we love our Tex-Mex, we love
Mhm.
our Mexican food. The punk rock poets Bowling for Soup said it best in their song Ohio. Besides, the Mexican food sucks north of here anyway. Which I wholeheartedly agree. And it sounds like you would be someone to have in my corner, because I know at my day job, the place where I work, at least two different times since I've
Mhm.
been there, they've just because they're bored and they want to throw out the argument of like hot dog is a sandwich. So I feel
Oh
like this is
gosh.
an important. You're rolling your eye and shaking your head, but I
My
feel like
friends ask me those questions specifically to trigger me, and I've given the rant so many times that food is not able to be simply taxonomically classified, and that taxonomical classification is a fool's errand.
okay.
The
Well, I mean,
is this
I did
yeah.
make one taxonomical sort of a thing that I thought was pretty good. I'll have to find it and share it with you sometime off microphone. But yeah, no, this sounds fascinating. I love this. Like, yeah, like food is part of everyone's culture, and it's definitely interesting to study those things, like you were alluding to. Like, oh, we think of like, oh, the Irish have always had potatoes, or the Italians have always had tomatoes. It's like, no, those are New World foods. Like they didn't exist natively there. Um, just thinking offhand of coming up with something when I was learning about Mongolia, and I was like, oh,
Mhm.
like what is their dairy situation like? And apparently in Mongolia, they like do like horse milk because they have a lot of horses out on the steppes. And it's like, well, we don't do horse milk, but like in somewhere where it's like literally the only major city we have is like Ulaanbaatar, and the rest of it is just open steppes.
Yeah.
And it's like we don't have cities and places, and it's like it's farmers, with horses and cattle and stuff like that, and like horse milk ends up becoming the thing that ends up being like a part of an ingredient with the alcohol. Because I was
Mhm.
looking up something, I was like, "What's an interesting alcohol?" I was like, "I don't know. What's like an interesting, not like a dulce de leche sort of like a Cubano milk dairy sort of a alcoholic drink." I was like, "What is it like in Mongolia?" And I found out about this whole
Mhm.
thing with like horse's milk used in making like a beer sort of a thing in Mongolia. So fascinating stuff. And
Yeah.
random tangents for D&D nerds, for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what our players love. And then all you have to do is repackage that real world information into something about, you know, an NPC or something, and then boom, yeah, you have information. And I feel like that's always the biggest thing is, you know, I have people asking me, you know, how do you become a better DM? And one, obviously, is just experience. Don't be afraid to do it. Everyone sucks at the beginning. I was an atrocious DM. And you're going to be an atrocious DM for a while. But the biggest one is just like steal. You know, learn about the real world and think about logically how would that affect whatever either world you're building, or if you're running a module, how that would affect like NPCs within it, that kind of stuff. Just being more knowledgeable about the things that go on will always make you a better DM. So like that, you know, the horse milk alcohol, I used to live in China, I had no idea about that. So that's something I'll be stealing as well, and just flagrantly steal, and it will gradually, you know, build up that knowledge base, and you have more fun things to give your players.
There we go. I feel like we could spend the whole rest of this podcast just on this passion alone, but I would be doing us a disservice because I think it's time to head into some NPC creation.
Yes.
And NPC creation is brought to you by you, the podcast audience, and our patrons from Patreon. So now is the time of the show where we give a shout out, a loud hurrah, to our comfortable patrons and above with a loud hurrah. So I've got my what is it? It's Irish Morgan whiskey. It was a whiskey that I got for Christmas, and I added a little mix cocktail thing in there, so it's like a John Collins sort of a whiskey drink. So that's what I've got to cheers our patrons. So to you, our queen of the Patreon, Goblin Katie, aka Katie Downey, as well as our other wealthy patrons, Anson Jablinski and good old mom and dad, we say cheers. Again, these fine folks donate just $2 a month, and they're able to get shout outs on every episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests. And not only are these patrons comfortable, they're wealthy and sometimes aristocratic, which means they get to introduce an element of chance to the random tables that we have that we're going to use here today. So if you want to learn more details about what we have to offer here, you should go to the show notes below. You should just go to the podcast website or go directly to patreon.com/sidekicks and side quests to learn more about the accommodations that we have awaiting for you. Help us to grow and expand the levitating platter in this demi-plane and worlds beyond. Okay, so we definitely did some collaboration talk behind the scenes to figure out how are we going to do this? How are we going to combine our loves and strengths together? And so what we've come to the arrival at is that you have this great spanking new Cooking with Bastions, a guide to restaurant design and management for the 2024 rules. You want to make a chef character of somehow, but you want to start with yours so we can figure out what kind of a chef this character is. And then we'll transition over to my random tables to discover like what kind of chef they are. Now we kind of like figure out their life story and some of the other key details about them to kind of plug it all, synergize it, and make them perfect NPC staff for your players to have at their stronghold, their bastion, their home base, their business of operations.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, perfect. So you were very kind and gracious to share with me your document here, which again, kudos. It's fantastically outlined. It's got brilliant art in here, and it's all formatted nice and neat, and it's great. So I think here, maybe towards what is it?
Page 9. You just drop down there.
Page 9. Perfect. Okay. So yes, here we are. So we are going to go to the hireling section. So here we go. Just to kind of not to give the whole thing away, you know.
Oh, it's available free. You can give the whole thing away. All my content is completely free for all users.
Well, there you go.
If you'd like to, you can support me on Coffee, but I will never paywall anything.
Well, there you go. They're a true gentleman of the people. So here we go in this hireling section. Here's the general information for each hireling. So these are the kinds of things that we may get to kind of go through here. So like hireling name, lineage, years of experience, culinary background, culinary feature, learning rate, and locality. So as we work through this section, I can see it goes years experience, culinary background, culinary feature table, location of origin, and learning rate. And so
Yep.
those are the things that we're going to roll for first, and then we'll hop over to my tables. Is that correct?
Yeah, that sounds good. And I can walk us through these, a little bit of explanation of each one,
Go for
and
it.
then I'll hand it over to you for we'll figure out the background of that character.
Perfect. And
Okay.
I think you did say for me you wanted to wait till the end to get the name, whether that's something that you're inspired by and you're going to come up with it, or if you want to do a D20 roll and see what
Yeah.
works.
I've always done names last, and I think that's just because names are the hardest part of a character for me, so I procrastinate.
Sure.
But yeah. So generally, when you're making a hireling, you'll know name, lineage, that kind of stuff. And so the stuff we're going to roll on first is years experience. And so I have my trusty D20 here. And so for years experience, this is going to determine how long your hireling has been in the business of cooking, restaurant management, kitchen work, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
Are they the bear? Are they just the
yeah.
person working minimum wage at a fast food restaurant, or are they like Chef Gusteau from
Yeah.
Ratatouille?
Yeah. Oh, an important thing to note here is that feel free for this portion to adjust it to your NPC's lifespan compared to lineage. You know,
Sure.
a kobold isn't going to live as long as an elf. So if,
I mean, not
yeah,
unless they took a potion of immortality or
yeah,
they
or write that
made
in
a
their
deal.
backstory.
Yeah, right in their backstory, they made a deal with the devil and now they live forever.
Yep. Okay. So I'm going to roll. I got a 617. So 17, that means that according to this table, they have 5 to 10 years experience. So they're relatively seasoned.
Okay. As far as their seasoning, would you say,
I would hope. I would hope. Oh,
like a
unless they've gotten fired a lot.
like a paprika? Is it like a good salt rub or
Yeah. I'd say a nice Cajun rub of sorts. You know,
nice
there's a
Cajun
good
rub?
amount of flavor there.
Okay, I'm a dad, so of course we have to do our dad jokes on the
Yeah.
podcast. So, okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
So then culinary background. So this one is dependent on years experience. For one, if they didn't have any experience, then you don't roll here. But thankfully, ours does have some experience. So
Okay.
we will roll here. So I'll do a D20 roll. That is a 12. They were a brewer in a small ale house.
Ooh.
So they are particular to things that they can imbibe.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking like microbreweries or something
Yeah.
like that. Like
Yeah, it could be fun, whatever it is. You know, one of the things that I love researching is how, you know, like old breweries, if you know, like German abbey breweries and anything,
yeah.
or even like old distilleries, like how a lot of that quality came about. One of the funny little tidbits to, you know, get off on a tangent is that a lot of Scotch distilleries in Scotland, they didn't know why, but it just became like a ritual that when they replaced their copper stills, that they would take the new copper still and beat it and bang it up in the same way as the previous copper still, and it just was like a, you know, a superstition, so to say.
Mhm.
And then people these days, you know, actual researchers and scientists have looked into it and be like, no, that was like actually the correct thing to do, because there were so many tiny little interactions that happen on like the molecular level that
Mhm.
doing that actually kept it consistent. So I like including those kind of things that might just be like old wives' tales in setting, but
Mhm.
actually have realistic reasons why you would do that. So maybe this guy with his 5 to 10 years of experience, or this gal with her 5 to 10 years of experience, has started to adopt those things, and those superstitions have been passed down to them.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, culinary feature table. If you roll 16 or higher, they have a culinary feature. So this one, I got a 15, which means they are a culinary diplomat. And I do have
Ooh.
that in a separate section, but I'll give the information. Culinary diplomats are basically, they know a lot of different culinary aspects from different you know, locales, different cultures and everything, and they're good for branching those kind of
Mm.
things of, oh, hey, I know a lot about, you know, if we're thinking real life, someone who knows a lot about Korean cuisine and someone who knows a lot about, you know, Mexican cuisine or South African cuisine. And whether they're doing it for fusion, whether they're doing it for, you know, they're the person you want to invite when you have like a diplomat come through and prepare food
Mm.
for them, those kind of things. So this individual, maybe he knows all about both how to create elvish mead and dwarven firewater kind of
Ooh.
things.
Yeah, the kind of the alcoholic savant,
Exactly.
sommelier of the brewery, the beer snob, if you will. It's like,
Oh yeah, I like that
well,
idea.
actually, if you know you're going more of a goblin
Mm-hmm.
still water, it's you got to get it more grimy. But like if you're
Yeah.
really going for like dwarvish, like ale, then it's like, oh, you really need to go up here. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that kind
love
of guy.
that.
He's going to correct you on absolutely everything. Actually, no, that's more of that's a hill dwarven ale, not a mountain dwarven ale. They use a completely different hop.
Right.
Okay, so that location of origin. This is a general one. It doesn't have to be like exactly where. It's in relativity to wherever the kitchen is.
Sure.
So I got a 1. He's a local born and raised.
Ooh.
So wherever your party is from or wherever they're running their kitchen, he is going to be someone who knows the lay of the land, the lay of the city, for whatever reason it is.
Perfect. What a excellent NPC to drag and drop. It's
Yeah.
like conveniently, it's like, oh yeah, I grew up here. I know that guy over there. He always has been picking his nose. Like he's
Yeah.
done that since he was a kindergartner.
And he knows all the different cultures. He might be a good mentor character for the party.
Okay.
Okay, and then finally, learning rate. This basically determines how quick they can pick up new things. I got a... Oops, sorry, that's a D6, not a D20. 6. So fast.
Ooh.
So he picks up new things quick. So yeah, he'd be a great mentor character to drop into any setting for your characters. They can pick up new things quickly. They can teach you about the lay of the land, and they can tell you about how to deal with different cultures if you're cooking for 3 Kreen or gnomes or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like well, I mean, like we were saying, like beer snob, but actually, it's like it doesn't come from a place of snobbery. It comes from a place of passion. It's like he really, 5 to 10 years, but like he really knows his stuff and he picks it up real quick. And I guess everyone's like super impressed with like how knowledgeable this person is.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, so let's jump to your side of it. Let's see exactly more of the concrete details on this individual.
Okay, so we're saving the name till last, so we'll go ahead and skip that one for now. We'll come back to it later here. The next thing we would then proceed to roll is for the ancestry of the character. So this is where we get to do a D100 or a 2D10 roll. And if you don't like it, you are free to re-roll.
No problem. Look at me. I live by the dice, I die by the dice. I can't tell my players one thing and then do the other. Okay, D100. I got a 44.
44 as I scroll the list. Ah, well, this sounds very perfect. A Vedalken.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, they're the perfectionist seekers of the world. So
that's fitting.
Okay. All right, a Vedalken. And then let's see, the next thing we roll for is, well, we kind of know what the job or role in society is. So so 5 to 10 years and they work at a small alehouse is the idea of where they work?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So they work in a alehouse in whichever setting or whichever town or place of interest.
That's the nice thing there. Wherever your party's going, they probably have a tavern, and that a tavern needs ale.
Okay. Like within the same tavern, or it's just like, oh, the ale house is separate from the tavern?
Either way is totally fine. I think that one comes up to the DM how they want to world build it. So if they want to have him, maybe he runs the tavern, and that he's the one who sources it. He could be a tavern keep, or, he could be working at a local tavern or a local ale house or a local brewery, and they could try to recruit him for their own organization.
Okay. And then let's see, what's the age range of this character? This is a D8 roll, so we kind of get an idea.
Okay, let me grab my D8. 2.
Teenager?
Wow, so they're a savant.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, Vedalkens are the ones, to my understanding, that they're always seeking like perfection.
Yeah,
and it works good in my setting. Without too much patting myself on the back. The Cadence is an ancient city state built on a ship that circumnavigates the mundane material world. And the idea is that to help them build the ship, all the gods, the begotten collectively before the fall, they worked together oh, well, we need someone to like be there physically to help us build the ship. So they created the Vedalken. So these are the guys that are like, they seek perfection because they were all made collectively by the gods together. And then when they were done, they exist as their own ethnic people group and stuff like that. And it's just, they have that inherent quality of like, well, we're always seeking the highest good. We're always seeking perfection because we were all made by the gods themselves.
I like that. So if I remember correctly, Vedalkens do age slower than humans. I think
Okay.
they achieve maturity somewhere around 30 to 50 range. So if he's a teenager, we'd say 20s, some odd.
Okay.
Um, which would actually make that fit. 5 to 10 years, we'll scale that up a little bit and just say 10 years experience. So yeah, he's been going for a little while since he could get around. He's been either in the family business or set out very young for that specific interest.
Okay. And then let's see. So now comes a part where we get to come up with the physical description of the character. So when
Mhm.
you picture this, this alehouse savant, what do you think that they look like?
Man, this is always the hardest part. That's the thing that my party loves asking me. What do they look like? I can give you a name. I can give you anything else. But what do they look like? I think one of the big things for him, I'm kind of leaning into, the perfection and everything. So I think he would kind of stick out compared to a lot of others in the alehouse,
Mhm.
where you might be assuming a lot of like dirty, grimy, different kinds of individuals who are like just covered in caking sweat. I think you would have someone who is there in like a leather spotless apron, who makes sure that their sleeves are rolled and cuffed up, that there's just nothing completely out of place at all with his physical appearance. I like the idea of like no tattoos, no piercings, nothing whatsoever, just incredibly like very focused on only the matter at hand of like my life is developing, searching, researching these kinds of different things, and that's it. Just like clean business. That's the one thing there. They're just hyper fixated on that at all times.
Okay, so clean and crisp. See, I was getting the image of I don't know if you have them where you are, but there's a chain called Whiskey Cake, and the sort of standardized uniform is like, oh, khaki pants and like some sort of white sleeve shirt, and
Mhm.
or like rolled up jean sleeves kind of a thing. The picture you get in your head when you think of like a brewery and you see
Yeah.
these like big bearded tattooed sort of guys. It's like, no, he's just like clean, crisp,
Hmm.
no distractions. All I care about is making the best ales and beers and
Yeah.
alcohols. Okay. And then let's see. To help us with the role playing aspect of the NPC, if you had to describe this character with three adjectives, what three adjectives would you use?
First one is definitely focused. Without a doubt, it is focused. That is her life's work. That is her life's goal. She's known this is her life's work. This is her life's
Ooh.
goal, even from a very young age. Of just this is what interests her, and not even from just the scientific aspect, but the socialization aspect. I like to think of this for, I'm always switching back and forth on how I'm thinking of this character already, but, now I'm thinking that this character, maybe this is their method of socialization and how they like bringing a room together. And that's really what they enjoy, is just seeing people gathering together. And so that's their focus. I think the next one would be innovative, constantly looking for new things, constantly looking for new combinations. As much as she's classically trained, also figuring out how to push the envelope and
Mhm.
asking why. Why can't we do it that way? Why can't you make that cocktail? Why can't you create this ale? Why can't you brew this spirit, kind of thing?
Mhm.
And I want to say the last one is serene. I'm going to say that she exudes a really calm and composed demeanor. It's funny because originally, I'm not too big on what the gender of my character is, but I was thinking, male at first, but now I'm kind of like leaning more female, even more to like buck stereotypes and everything
Yeah.
of, her being raised this way and just being able to like own a tavern house, and like, she walks in and just everyone knows like, okay, the person is here, maybe not the star of the show, not super lively, but like things are going to get taken care of while she's here. She just exudes that like calm, collected like serenity.
All right. So if you're thinking of this character as more feminine, and I know we described kind of the appearance, I guess in my
Mhm.
head I was kind of defaulting to a more masculine appearance as well. Is she, is she, certainly a feminine person, but she dresses masculine? Or when you said, oh, the leather and all clean and
Mhm.
spotless and no distractions or anything like that? Or does she purposely dress very feminine when maybe everyone else is like, oh, they're a dirty, grimy man? And she's like, I am prim and proper and I am a lady and I am here and I can outschool all you fools, sort of a
I
thing.
don't think she dresses overly feminine, so to say, as far as like blouses and dresses goes. But I do think she cares about her appearance when it comes to like cleanliness. So
Mhm.
I'm thinking like white linen, with like work pants and like a leather apron, that kind
Mhm.
of stuff. Like something simple. And I'm also thinking of someone who that her focus isn't on a lure or anything. Her focus is like what is going to be functional.
Mhm.
What is going to be functional for me to study, for me to develop, for me to brew, for me to craft and everything. Like she's a craftsperson through and through.
Okay. So kind of like a sailor's sort of an outfit, if you
Yeah,
will.
almost. I like that. That with just a functional leather, and I want to say like a leather apron with a bunch of pockets that she personally has stitched, each for a different tool that she always knows exactly where it is.
She's like, this is my hops barometer that I can,
Exactly. Or
and this
this
is
is my what is it specifically they use their gravitational that they pop in to see exactly what the ABV is.
mhm.
So like those kind of things.
Okay. All right, very cool. And then this is the part where I say, and now we get to go back to some dice rolling.
Okay.
We like all of our NPCs to have something cool on their person, whether it be a valuable item, a piece of lore, a secret, or an ideal or concept. So this is a combination roll where you get to roll a D4 first for the category, and then a
Okay.
D6 for the particular thing.
Let me grab my D4. Okay. I got a 3.
Ooh, so this is gonna be a secret.
Okay. And what do I roll now?
And now you roll a D6.
Okay. I got a 5.
A 5. Okay, so your answer was provided by previous guest Kiki Hayden. It says here the secret of our character, of our Ale Meister. You have a herd of Almiraj that follow you around, and you don't want anyone to know.
Okay. Interesting. I like that.
So yeah, what is the deal with this little herd of Almiraj?
So Almiraj, they're the little bunny folk, right?
Yeah,
They're from the Feywild.
they're like unicorn bunnies.
Yeah. Um. So that makes me think that she has some Fey connection.
Mm.
Which also makes me wonder. Now I'm pulling in like information of she's in this career at a very young age comparatively.
Mhm.
So like, is there anything more supernatural there? So now I'm thinking like maybe like Fey touched in some way of maybe like fell into the Feywilds as a child and like time worked differently and spent a lot more time there than technically her age should allow. And for
Mhm.
whatever scenario happened, now she has these Almiraj that like follow her in a in a weird little boogeyman style that she's trying to not make too obvious.
Mhm.
Which might also, lead to a thing of her just randomly disappearing. Of like sometimes of like, hey, I need to make sure I'm not seen with these around me. I
Mhm.
can't have these questions asked.
Right, if it's like a situation of like, little Pikmins, or if it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what is it? My son inadvertently downloaded a, Sonic Frontiers game for our
Mm.
Xbox, and there's little
Oh, the Chow.
doodads. What I don't sorry, I'm not my son is like he's 3, soon to be 4,
Yeah.
and he very much is like, "Sonic everything," and I still don't know all the Sonic lore, forgive me. I remember playing Sonic on a Sega Genesis. I remember that, but I was not that heavily invested in the Sonic lore. So I don't know what those little dudes are. But if it's kind of like that, or it's like little fairies or something like
Yeah.
following her around, she thinks of them as like little fairies. Maybe it's like a thank you or something like that from whoever she played with. She
Mm-hmm.
fell in this portal into the Feywild, and as a thank you for being a good
Yeah.
friend for however long she was stuck there without her knowing or realizing, just a little clutch, hutch,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you call a group of rabbits, a little group of rabbits of Almiraj just follow her around and hang out, and they're just kind of like the eternal promise of friendship, if you will.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah, and then of course, I mean, Almiraj are cool, and if the party ever found out, and like Yeah, it'd just be like, "Oh, I want one of those," and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
they just kinda, like, disappear. They just it's like a video game thing, like, oh, you try and get near them to interact with them, and then, whoop, they vanished. I don't know where they went. They just
Yeah.
disappeared.
They're all hers.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then now is the part where we get to, come up with a particular quest that our character would be willing to recruit or hire player characters to go on her behalf.
So now I'm totally thinking of her as a tavern keep, the more we've been
Okay.
discussing.
Yeah.
And so now I'm also thinking of her with the Almiraj secret, which I'm loving. And, them gradually finding out more and more of her backstory. I'm imagining her gradually giving them more and more quests to like test their trust and, connection. So starting off with simple things like, hey, could you get, this ingredient from the Feywild for this beer I'm brewing or something?
Mhm.
More and more things just to like test who they are as a party. But I think that would be working up to this like more important quest of, for whatever reason, like her Almiraj are getting sick now. And she
Ooh.
knows it's because of like some connection to whichever Fey like originally bestowed that blessing on her. And so she wants the party to like go and like find and like check on that Fey and like see what's going on. And I think that would be like a fun like introductory quest into its own like arc of like saving like a poisoned or dying Fey or like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think that would be a fun one for the party, and then seeing where that goes from there, and then obviously that gets her in your corner afterwards.
Okay. Yeah. So this idea of it could be like a sick or ailing archfey
Mm-hmm.
or a trickster figure or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever kind of creature they happen to be from the Feywild. Hopefully you pick something good and not something sinister.
yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, we're thinking like Almirage, we're thinking, like cute bunnies and everything. I mean, you could take the dark route, but I don't know. I'm kind of thinking, like something benevolent,
Yeah.
and that opens up to like a larger arc of, something's wrong.
A
This good
unicorn.
fairy godmother type has been like deceived or something, and like there's like a coup or something going on in the Feywild.
Oh.
And this Vedalken is like on the good side, or like was bestowed by like a good fairy godmother who took her in, and now she needs to help her fairy godmother now.
Oh, well, now, well, just thinking about our one of our previous guests that we just recorded with recently, Game Master Mom Nicole, and she talked about like, oh, for my daughters and for a couple of sessions of our family game, we would, we maybe pop out of D&D and we go play Tales of Equestria, the My Little
Mm,
Pony game,
yeah.
and I just said it, and I was like, what if she befriended a unicorn in her time in the Feywild, and that's why she got Almirage, because maybe she was like, "Oh, I like bunnies; they're cute," and she's like, "Oh, I wish bunnies had like unicorn horns," and she's like, "Well, in fact, they
Hmm.
do. They're Almirage," and so then that's why this little group of Almirage have been able to follow her around. So now, oh, something's wrong with the unicorn or something
Yeah.
like that, and now she has to go on this quest for like the last unicorn, if you will,
Hmm.
or sort of inspiration or whatever, but in the Feywild or whatever.
It's funny you mentioned unicorn because they're my top three for most requested monsters to figure out how to cook and eat, and I'm like, you are all monsters. Everyone
Yeah,
who's requesting this, but hey,
some
I get
real
requests all kinds of
Voldemorts
things.
out there
I
trying to
know. I'm like,
trying
you
to
want to
sneak.
kill and eat a unicorn?
Yeah, because what if I remember it from the book? It was like, oh, their blood is like silvery, like mercury
Hmm.
colored, and it's like, oh, if you drank it, you would get like a sort of a boost to immortality, but at a great personal cost
Yeah.
to your soul.
Yeah, literally. And I think in the old editions, that's like one of the actions that can straight up, back when they were more focused on alignment, like
Mm,
straight up, you are evil. Your alignment is evil now. You don't kill unicorns and be a good person.
right. Oh, I was just putting the unicorn out of his misery.
Yeah, no, you're no.
Evil. Okay, all right. So the quest is to go and make contact. We're thinking maybe with like a unicorn
Yeah, I like
that
that.
originally, maybe she, I don't know. So she must know the name. So she gives them a
Mhm.
name. Maybe doesn't lead on that it's a unicorn, but like, oh, this is the person I need you to go make contact with in the Feywild. I haven't heard from them in a while. I'm worried something's wrong.
Mhm.
And so she wants the party to go investigate. So now we have some questions to consider. What's going to be the reward for the party. So they end up journeying to the Feywild. They end up discovering this unicorn. Whatever problem is befalling the unicorn, dungeon masters figure out what that whole adventure is. But they come out through the end of it. It's a success, and they come back to our Vedalken and report on their success. And all the Almiraj are okay and happy and all that stuff. What's going to be the reward for the party?
Well, I think it's only fair if our Vidalkin, got a boon or a blessing that for, saving or protecting this unicorn, that each of the party members also gets some sort of boon. And probably not, they each get, a liege of Almirages, but I'm sure at least one of your party members wants an Almiraj. So I'm assuming one of them gets one as like a little pet or a follower. But I think that they could each get, some sort of boon, and I would, create a table or leave it up to, D&D or DM and PC like discussion, which those are my favorite kind of rewards, is, very, very personalized to the player, of whatever that is, something, maybe it's like they get like one wish, so to say, not like a full on wish spell, but something that is within the unicorn's, magical power to impact in some way of like, they want to find their like missing relative. This unicorn is able to give them like some information towards that they've heard, or like that they can, use magic to like scry and find out information, whatever that is. Or they want more powerful and they get like a blessing on their weapon, that kind of stuff. So I would say the big reward would probably be that. And then the reward from the Vedalken herself would definitely be, and this is the one that I always give to players in some capacity because it's so easy and they love it. It's free booze. That's the simplest one. People just love going into a tavern and being like a regular.
Yeah.
And being like, yeah, don't worry about it. You don't gotta worry about your tab. You did me like such a solid that beer's on me.
Yeah. Yeah. And for rescuing adorable bunnies and going into the Feywild after a unicorn friend. I feel like that owes you beer for life.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have to consider the opposite. What's going to be the consequence of failure or refusing the call to the adventure?
Well, I think that if we're going to leave it in the PC's hands one way or another, then that it should have. I think this is up to the DM if they want this to be a tie-in subquest that leads to a larger arc down the line. That maybe is, hey, the big bad evil guy they got points to whatever conquest they're trying to pull off. They were able to successfully poison or kill this like protector beast, and this part of the Feywild like fell to shadow. Or if we want to just make it like a straight up side quest with no ramifications to the larger plot, make it a thing of, the Vedalken's demeanor completely changes. A darkness falls upon her. She's lost this, mentor figure, and she's lost her, liege of Almiraj companions that she's always had and everything. And so losing that connection with her would be, that's a big loss, to lose that connection to your tavern keep, to not be able to have that anymore, especially if you're running a restaurant in the area.
I was going to say, does it tank it?
I think it could, maybe that I don't like to make purely binary decisions for failure or success.
Sure.
I do like there to be a gradation in both directions.
Sure.
So I do think it depends on how badly they fail, you know, maybe like completely just refusing the call is a gradual, descent, but like taking it on and failing spectacularly, or even, getting a offer by the big bad person to, kill the unicorn for a promise of power.
Yeah.
Then that's an extra fail. That's a big fail.
Yeah. You one of the player characters has a secret flaw of like, I've always wanted to know what unicorn blood tastes like, and they actually go in there and they're like, oh, well, we just want to murder you because we're curious of what you taste like.
Yeah, you shouldn't say this on air. You're gonna get my party ideas.
Okay. So now we know that information, and we have a pretty good idea. Okay, so scales of degradation as far as like refusing versus how catastrophically bad you fail. Are you wanting to roll for a random name off of my D20 chart, or are you inspired for a name?
You know what? I think there's some things that are coming to me. I'm thinking her name is Thalara, and her surname is Solanis.
How do I spell that?
Yeah, Thalara would be Thalara.
Mm-hmm.
and her last name would be Solanis, Solanis.
All right, Thalara Solanis, the Vedalken.
Yeah.
And so we're envisioning her as like a full-fledged tavern keeper at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. Any curiosity on the name? Is the name of the place a wink and a nod to her little furry magical friends?
Yeah, I'm thinking that would be a good one. As far as that goes, get that connection to the Almiraj.
Yeah.
And make that a little bit more obvious for the players as they develop into learning more about her and that kind of thing.
Yeah. She just has this weird obsession with these animals. Like no one's
Yeah.
ever seen one in this town, and they're just kind of like, "Oh, that's an interesting cutesy name. We've heard about those in folk tales, but it's like, no, she's really insistent that she has them as her friends."
Yeah, no, I like that. And make her tavern all Mirage themed or rabbit themed in general. Just like make everything like fully rabbit and that kind of stuff. Like she loves her rabbits.
Yeah.
Or even make it that her all Mirages.
She employs herringons.
Yeah. Yeah, even make it that, her all Mirages appear as rabbits to like anyone who's not Fey touched.
Oh, there we go.
So she just loves bunnies.
Yeah, she loves bunnies. Yeah, the hair and the herringons.
Yeah.
And if you're Fey touched, that's something really cool because now your Archfey Warlock pact warlocks are like,
yo, why does that rabbit have horns?
Yeah, and she looks at him and like, wait a minute, you know too? You have this height? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
I'm just trying to think of any puns with hairs or something in them.
The Almiraj Lodge. That's the name of her tavern.
Ooh. The Almiraj Lodge. Off the dome. That was fantastic. Kudos to you, sir. The Almiraj.
Done a lot of naming.
All right. I love that. I think that's our solid title for the episode as well. So with these questions answered, I know we have some alternate questions.
Yeah.
Do you feel like any of those need to be answered, or do you have a pretty good idea of Thalara Solanis and her Almiraj Lodge?
I feel like I have a good idea in my head, but we can go through them to paint the picture more for the audience.
Sure. So, what are the goals and motivations of Thalara Solanis as a character?
I'm thinking of her purely as a academic and a craftsperson. So her goal is to do what she does perfectly, and that no matter what traveling, no matter what studying, no matter what discussions are necessary, like she wants to learn more about brewing and creating like the perfect pint.
And then, so then how do these goals and motivations affect her general personality?
I think she's very driven. And so she is very focused on individuals who can advance that development. But at the same time, she's not cold. She's not someone who's going to just manipulate you and use you. Like she cares about, her friends she cares about. As mentioned, she wouldn't be running a tavern if she didn't care about creating a nice atmosphere for individuals. So definitely a balance between those of, wants to create that serenity, wants to create that peace for adventurers to come back to, but also is very focused and driven on, hey, I heard that this person can help me out. I will do whatever is necessary to learn more about it.
Okay. And then how does Thalara normally interact with other people? Is she pretty nuanced, or is she pretty even keel across the board, depending on if it's like friends and family versus enemies and rivals versus the people that work for her, etc.?
I'm imagining her as that tavern keep that anyone can go to. And she definitely has some nuance to her of the people she likes, but she can handle people she doesn't like. Business is business.
Mm-hmm.
Or even her, tavern being like, if we want to keep it in a more metropolitan setting or something, being like the neutral zone, where no matter what guild or faction, like no one hates bunnies. You can go to the happy, safe bunny place, whether it's people from this one bloodthirsty gang or whatever it is. Like that's fine. That's a neutral zone that different gangs or packs can like go into, and so she can manage the diplomacy between both.
This 20-year-old Vedalken running like the equivalent of like a cat cafe where it's like hardened street criminals and cops alike come into this place, and they all just want to pet bunnies. They want to have like a nice beer and just like pet some bunnies and chill and relax.
I think that's my favorite part of like any hardened or like, criminal or villain. Like people will refer back to a specific scene from like Yu Yu Hakusho that's just very iconic. Of there's this, bloodthirsty bounty hunter who was just shown killing people mercilessly, and he walks in to like discuss a contract or like some work he needs to do with like the guy who's contracting him. And you assume badass guy's gonna ask for whiskey straight and everything, and he's like, what can I get you to drink? And he's like, could I get a glass of orange juice? And, it's just like those idiosyncrasies I feel like make people so much more like realistic. It's this this terrible bloodthirsty person isn't always a terrible bloodthirsty person. Maybe they like a glass of hot cocoa too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of idiosyncrasies, does Thalara happen to have a particular accent or language that she uses? Are there any idiosyncrasies in how she acts or speaks?
There have to be because of her time in the Feywild.
Mm,
So I'm thinking that we did mention she's a local,
mm,
but I'm definitely thinking that there's certain things that she says that are tells that even though she's a local, she hasn't always been here. And
mm,
so I'd like to think of those as like maybe different like phrases of speech that are only from the Feywild that just slip out every now and then.
mm,
That aren't exactly actively wrong, but are just off. And you wouldn't notice it unless you were actively paying attention of like, that's not really a phrase that's used around here. If she's asking about, hey, how much does it owe you and everything, and she is like, oh, don't worry about it. Your purse strings are lighter than hippogriff feathers. And it's like, well,
mm.
no one really says that around here. Oh yeah, don't worry about it. It's not much, kind of stuff. And then she immediately like brushes it off.
Interesting. Yeah, I was getting if you've ever seen the original Gary Cooper movie of Mr. Cooper Goes to Town, the original movie that the Adam Sandler Mr. Deeds movie is based
Oh,
on.
okay.
In the courtroom scene when they're like doing they're doing the trial to figure out if whether he's mentally stable to be able to hold this fortune, and they interview the two old ladies from his hometown, and they use a word or a term, and then like the sophisticated New York people are like, well, what's this term that you mean? And it's like, oh, it means like he's like befuddled with pixies, and like and then everyone kind of laughs at them, and they don't know any better or understand. So that's kind of the picture I was
Yeah.
conjuring in my head when you were describing her using phrases or different expressions, turn of phrases that may allude to something in the Feywild. That it's like, oh, if it's a more folksy sort of a setting that we find her in like in a small town, it's like, okay, maybe that is possibly something they say here, but for the savvy among the party, they may be like, actually, that's not actually what they would say here. And maybe the other locals kind of
Hmm.
know, like, oh, Thalara sort of, I don't know, like one day she was here and then the next day she came back and, she seemed like she was a whole completely different person.
Yeah.
But from her perspective, it had been like, it was like a Brigadoon situation where
Yeah.
it was like, oh, I was gone for 50 years.
Yeah.
But really I came back and then it was like, okay, it's only been like a day. But
Mhm.
mentally I've aged like 50 years,
Yeah.
kind of a situation.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that, the more we're talking, the more I'm building this character of, maybe this like unicorn like is a representation of like some god of revels. And that's where like her love for like drink and everything has come from. And
Mm,
same thing where that's why she's like so accomplished at such a relatively young age. And it's like, well, yeah, she's 20, but like mentally, like, well, she was, partying and developing and, doing like vineyard work and winery work, in the Feywild for like 40 years.
mm.
So she came back as this like 10-year-old with, an entire multiple decades worth of experience.
Must be 18 years of age to apply, but needs 30 years of
Yeah.
experience.
She would be the one who fits.
Yeah, she's like, checkmate. Yeah. And then let's see, what impact has Thalara made on the world? How has she shaped her local area?
I think for her, as much as like her aspirations are high craftsperson wise, I think the impact on her world is very local. She has traveled a little bit. She has learned about other cultures. But if she's from here originally and stayed around here, I'm assuming there's something that's going to keep her here relatively. That's probably her drive to just create like a community establishment. And so that's the biggest thing, is that in the years that she's had her tavern, that she's just, created this establishment, whether she opened it or, she took it over from like a previous mentor and developed it and that kind of stuff, learning from them. So I think that would be the bigger thing for her, is just creating a community center where people can feel, comforted and involved at.
And then does she have any current problems that prevent her from being a bigger player on the stage?
Yeah, I think that goes back to that side quest we were talking about, that concern, that anxiety of the sick Almirages, and knowing that that's a connection to whatever her patron was while she was in the Feywild, and that's just weighing on her mind, that, as much as she's trying to study to get her mind off of it, it's always there. She's dropping flasks when she shouldn't. She's adding incorrect amounts, of ingredients, and it's just not like her. But, that's just weighing on her mind so much that these little mistakes are creeping up.
Yeah. And as tempted as I am to want to name all the possible names for the Almirages or even this unicorn patron, the only other question I think I have left here is, because I know the idea, with your information is that, oh, this is a person that you'd be able to hire
Mhm.
for your bastion, for your kitchen, or in this particular instance, like, oh, you want to have your own brewery on
Mhm.
premises or whatever. So is the idea, if we're using 2024 rules, so she runs the Almiraj Lodge, she could potentially be recruited to
Mhm.
like come work at your place?
Yeah, definitely. I think at the very least, she probably could still be the tavern keep. And one of the amenities that the players can actually develop in my rule set is a small batch brewery within their
Mm.
bastion. So it could be a thing where maybe she works there like weekly. She comes in and she trains individuals
Ah.
specifically to use it, and maybe that's the benefit that they get from this side quest, is that they get her as a hireling.
Ooh.
She comes in and she works the weekends at their brew house,
Mm.
while she works her own lodge the rest of the time and that kind of stuff. But she's still a hireling. She's, still paid, and she's still, teaching and developing the rest of their staff.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good way to blend the two together. Yeah. So she could be like, sure, I'll consult and like,
Yeah.
help out like a day or two of the week. And then the rest of the time I'm, in knee deep in, mixtures and
Mhm.
recipes and variations and cloves and flavor profiles and all this stuff.
Yeah, and if any of the players are interested enough to make a small batch brewery in their bastion, then I'm sure that they would have a bunch of fun just talking to her, regardless of, geeking out over whatever new ingredients they got on their recent adventure, and like, can we ferment this? I want to see if we can ferment this.
Yeah. Can you ferment a cattle bus?
Yeah, see. However, is it going to be something that we're fermenting like the tusks, or are we fermenting like the mildew that grows on the hair from one specific swamp? I mean, you could even think of, like real world example, Scotch.
Mhm.
That is specifically fermented from the peat within the swamplands and everything, and maybe different Catabalebus in different swamps. Like their hair gives like a different flavor to the grain that you then distill, and that kind
Or
of stuff. So
sloths?
yeah, exactly. Any of those kind of things, of like anything that the flavor comes from like the earth and like the specific topography and setting that this monster lives in.
There you go. Perfect. I think this thoroughly covers our brilliant NPC that we've made here today, that now it's only appropriate to throw them into a random encounter. This random encounter is brought to you by my sponsor, Zencastr. Zencastr came into my life when I didn't think I would need it, but now I definitely need it with trying to raise a family and keep the podcast episodes flowing and all that stuff, and not trying to keep myself awake for all hours of the night trying to get these episodes edited. Thanks to Dane and Benjamin over at Dispel Magic showing me this service, I was hooked, and I decided to become a paying member so I could get access to all these awesome tools with editing and getting these great episodes to you. So it is so easy and super easy now to record a podcast with Zencastr. You log into your browser and you start recording a high quality podcast right away. You could record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen, knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. A hard sell. On that point alone, I would I've been podcasting for a couple of years now. That is amazing. So that is a great selling point of this service. You can sound your best. Have you ever worried what you might sound like on a podcast? With Zencastr's post-production process, it makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes the ums and ahs as you click on that feature in the post-production settings, and in your recordings, it's going to remove those awkward pauses and conversations too with the click of a button. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. It really is that easy. It's all in one. If you have thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are done. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute to Spotify, Apple, and all other major podcast destinations. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code SIDEKQPodcast, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Again, the website, zencastr.com/pricing. Use the code SIDEKQPodcast and get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. Thank you so much to the sponsor, and back to the podcast. All right, and so now this section of the show is where we get to do a little bit of role play, a vignette, a scene with the NPC that we've made here today. So I think, Marcus is going to do a great job with Thalara Solanis and the Almiraj Lodge, but the question becomes, who am I going to be in the scene? Am I going to be one of my reoccurring adventurer characters that's going to get this side quest? Am I just another member of staff, noticing this funk that Thalara is in? Or I don't know, or the unicorn, from in the past, from when she was a kid in the Feywild. I don't know. What kind of scene are you interested in showing off Thalara in?
I think a good scene would probably be, you already mentioned a character that I started piquing my interest. The Archfey Warlock, that's part of the party, walks in, and we'll say, just for convenience, that they're also interested in brewing, that they're going to be the individual who eventually is. But more importantly, is Fey touched and notice these things that others haven't before about her organization, about her little rabbit friends that are actually Almirages, and she can be very excited to finally have a compatriot who she hasn't been able to talk to anyone about this. She spent so many years it's horns and everything, and no one saw it, and now she finally can.
Yeah. Well, this is perfect. You say that, and one of the characters in the roster for the podcast, her name is Agape, and she is a lilac-colored tiefling Sorlock. So she started off as a Feywild magic-influenced sorcerer, and then she made a Archfey Warlock pact with one of the other NPCs made on this podcast, Prosperina. So I think this is the perfect opportunity for Agape to show up, to go to the Almiraj Lodge and be able to actually see the Almiraj and have that instant connection with Thalara. So would you like to set the scene, or should I go ahead and set the scene?
I'll set the scene. So the party has just entered this new location. They have been on foot for the past 2 weeks, venturing out from the capital. They have heard some news of a quarry that needs to be taken care of in the local farmlands outside of the capital. They've been given this contract specifically to investigate this unknown beast. And as they make their way into town for the night, before they have a chance to really start investigating, as the sun has started to set, they decide to make their way to the local tavern. As they wander the streets, they see a waving wooden sign, rickety, with the old metal creasing against rusted metal. And they see a picture of a rabbit with a horn on it. They get closer and they can read the Almiraj Lodge. They make their way into the establishment, and they can see that while it is bustling with, a bunch of people all consuming their ale, eating their dinners, that it seems to be different than a lot of lodges they've been to otherwise. Whether that is because they're less intense and less bustling and less conflict going on. And there's an air of serenity in this entire establishment, even though you can tell that there are members of many different groups strewn across the establishment. And the one thing that they are drawn to immediately is the lady who is at the front. She is in the process of teaching a new hire exactly which taps and which spigots are used. She has the crystalline blue skin, and they notice that she is dressed in a completely creaseless white linen shirt with a very, very well kept leather apron, and just craftsman pants. Everything from her, from top to toe, looks like she's never had a spot on her.
Yeah, and where we last left Agape, she had recently stopped into the baker shop run by Daniel, who's a bobbier, one of the beaver folk from my world. Um, and there was a whole kerfuffle there, and going off on this quest for one of the three orbs of Harglax. So that's why she's with the party. She's on the
Perfect.
journey to go, on this big hunt of a quest for this, and so they stopped in this town, and thankfully that Agape was able to like get a party together. And so she steps foot in this, and she immediately is picking up on all of the Fey vibes of this place. And she's like she's like elbowing everyone else, like, guys, just look at that, don't you feel that? And everyone else is kind of regarding her as like, hey, we're on an important mission. We were appointed by the court. The court wizard summoned us and mentioned this whole catastrophe that's looming. Like, we need to stay focused on the mission. And then like, Agape is completely awestruck. And is there an area maybe where the rabbits actually are, where they can like freely be in this place, or are they like sequestered and they only appear like when they want to be seen? Or if she looks off in a certain spot, she like sees an Almiraj, she tries to point it out to someone, and then when they look, they don't see anything there.
I think that that's probably one of the quirks of the tavern, is that as long as it's a normal operating night, the bunnies are just bouncing around.
Okay.
And that is the one rule of the tavern: you don't mess with the bunnies. You can pet them, they can jump on you and that kind of stuff, but anyone who hurts a bunny is just ostracized and better off dead. You do not hurt Thalara's bunnies. It's the one thing that everyone can agree on. So they're bouncing around the place.
Okay. Well, Agape's going to make her animal handling check, and we say in this instance, she gets a critical success.
Mhm.
So she like has one of the Almiraj hop into her hands, one of the like a big chungus of an Almiraj,
Mhm.
and she's like, "Oh my god!" So she's like going like weepy high pitch. She's like so happy and overwhelmed by the beauty of this creature, and she's just like, "Oh, you're so cute!" And she's like, rubbing her nose up on its nose, and she's petting it and scritching it, and she's like, "Oh, I just want to take you home and never let you go." And the rest of the party is like making their way up to the bar. While she's doing this, they kind of ignored her. They're like, "Hey, we've got our mission. We need our drinks. We need our food. We need to get going." So, so Agape's kind of having this moment just of her own revelry of like enjoying this beauty of the Fae. And so when Thalara has finished like with this training, she can look over and she can clearly see that this Agape, this lilac colored tiefling, is Fey touched, and that she is joyous, she's rapturous with this Almiraj in her hand that she's treating like the most precious creature that she's ever come across.
Yeah, I think she would definitely reach over, probably shout over, since the party came up, so she's probably a little bit separated, and probably first say to the party, "Oh, your friend really seems to like rabbits." Not sure that she understands this is more than a rabbit yet. And she yells over to the tiefling and is like, "Oh, Biscuit seems to really have taken a liking to you. I didn't know you were such a fan of rabbits."
Oh, Biscuits. Oh, your horn is so pretty.
And that
Oh,
immediately takes Thalara back. The moment she says, I'm sorry, his what?"
oh, his horn. It's so majestic. Oh, you're a big boy, aren't you? And she's like scritching him and like, getting up on his whiskers and like, oh, you're a big boy. You're a big chungus. You eat lots of carrots, don't you? Nom, 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 nom.
Thalara will immediately just pour drinks for the party, not even addressing them. Just, here's your drink, here's your drink, here's your drink, here's your drink. Go take it to tea.
Oh,
And then
the
as
party
the
is certainly happy with this. They're thankfully placated, and so they're like, oh, they look at Agape very strange, like, we don't know what magic you just sort of worked to get this for us, but thanks. You keep doing your thing to get us more free things.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that Agape probably starts going with the party over the table. And so Thalara immediately said, "Not you. Over here. Bring Biscuit."
Oh, okay. And she comes back over. She sets him down on the bar.
How? You can see his horn?
Yeah, duh.
No one else can.
Really? So
Uh,
everyone else thinks that these are like big, fluffy, cute rabbits?
that for the past 10 years, yes. That's all that I've seen.
Huh. Oh, the Almiraj Lodge. Now it makes sense.
Yeah, everyone told me I named it wrong. Why would I bring rabbits to an Almiraj Lodge? Thought I was just really into the books that, Mom always told us about, but no, you can see at least. I have to know. Tell me about yourself. Who are you?
Okay. So she's happy to like start going on this long winding journey talking about like, oh, well, I was always touched by the Feywild and, I would do my magic and sometimes it would go a little wonky. And then, she tells about meeting Prosperina and kind of like the organization that, well, I don't know. She starts saying, she says Prosperina and she's like, she snaps her finger and she's like, darn it, I've done it again. I've gotten in trouble a couple of times. I'm not really supposed to say her name, but like the organization that I work for, the Archfey, wink, wink, that I have a pact with, like, she's cool. She's given me a purpose and a mission, and yeah, she helps me out. She's a great friend. I love her. She's awesome.
Huh, you also have been blessed.
Yes, I have. And she scritches biscuits a little more.
Huh, well, if that's the case, then I might be able to ask you for a favor of sorts.
Ooh, a favor. What kind of favor?
Well, would you be able to ask your friend, whatever you said, Prismarina, Primarina? What was it? Oh, sorry, your
Prosperina.
friend. Your friend. Would you be able to ask your friend
Yeah.
if your friend knows of an individual in the realms that we both have ventured to named Heston?
Heston. Okay.
Yes. And whenever you have the chance, if you could just let me know, I'll be here and happy to reward any information you can find. They're an old friend of mine, and I wanted to check in on them.
Oh, okay, sure. I mean, I know we're kind of on this whole thing about the three orbs of Harglax, and I'm not quite sure what they mean, but like the court wizard we went and saw said they were like really dangerous. And so if that one lich is after them, it's probably a bad thing. So that's why I had to recruit all these guys because, like, I'm pretty badass myself, but eh, I'm, it's much easier to do it when you have a whole group of people than rather just trying to go in solo, that whole sort of a thing.
I can tell you get told to stop talking a lot, don't you?
She lets that hang and she doesn't quite finish the answer to so much sort of give you the answer.
That's okay. You're good in my book, but just for your own, I would say be a little bit more choosing on who you divulge information to. But please do let me know if you can find any information out about Heston. I will reward you as necessary for any information that you can give me. And please, as long as you are in town or around these parts, you have free lodging. I would love to spend any night by the fire chatting with you about your own experiences. I am enthralled.
All right. And yeah, no, so she's happy to do as you've asked. Um, she'll certainly ask if this requires like, oh, does she need to like go visit the Feywild right now? Or is it just like something that she can get to whenever she can?
The sooner the better, but it does sound like you have some stuff on your hands.
Mm.
So, if you can, or if you do know any other compatriots who might be able to assist, I would like to. Checking on an old friend. You never want to do it too late.
Mm.
But I do understand that there are sometimes things in stake for the world. So we can definitely discuss that as you do find out information.
I think just a fun way to end the scene. Maybe just be, you told her like, hey, maybe you need to be more choosing and like, so it's sort of alluding to like her free spirit rambunctiousness. She just straight up at the bar is just like, because I like to envision kind of like the Skyrim thing. On one hand,
Mhm.
she channels her
Yeah.
wild magic. On the other hand, she channels her warlock. So literally, she like channels her warlock powers, and you watch her eyes kind of like become bright emerald green and it's like literally her like summoning her connection to Prosperina to like ask the question. And I think her body lurches a little bit, and some sort of like Galadriel, when she's resisting the temptation of
Mm.
the ring, sort of a voice sort of pours out of her. And I don't know, just curious, whatever you think it may allude to, but like whatever condition Heston finds himself in, she just sort of like proclaims that out loud. And then when it's done, she like turns off the power and she kind of like shrugs and she like stretches and kinks out her neck. And she's like, oh, okay, well, uh, did that answer your question?
Thalara's jaw would be on the ground for one. I'm assuming that probably would have also drawn a scene within the tavern.
Mm.
And so Thalara, first off, would be like, drinks on me. Just a round of drinks for everyone.
The place
As you were doing.
cheers. The place cheers. They're like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then as soon as, she has a little bit of privacy, okay, I have another quest for you. End scene.
Perfect. Called it. Yeah, that's a great way to do the scene. And
Mhm.
I just love Agape. She's just so delightfully rambunctious and chaotic. To be able to play a Sorlock, which I've
Yeah.
never done, but I feel like if I had to play Sorlock, Agape would probably be a good choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go. Now that you've had a chance to inhabit the shoes of Thalara Solanis in a scene, how do you think it was getting to be her and envisioning the Almiraj Lodge in your head?
Well, that is a setting that I am immediately going to be pulling in one for one. I'm currently working on a larger campaign module that I am hoping to get out by the end of the year if I can, but it's a bit of a bigger project that I'm about halfway done with.
Okay.
That will have an entire module for DMs to be able to run a restaurant campaign from scratch, along with settings, along with characters, along with, wacky taverns and locations that they can, visit or recruit from. And so
Yeah.
I think this is a perfect addition, and this will definitely be going in the book with a shout out to you for it.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, no, that as long as I can make my mark on the world in some way, I may be only a D&D podcast that at this point in 6 seasons at the time of this recording has accumulated 18 total thousand downloads. I'm not going to have those crushing Instagram numbers. I'm not going to have the most liked tweets and skeets, whatever they call them on
Mhm.
Blue Sky, or anything like that. My YouTube channel is just like a place to back up the
Mhm.
RSS feed. It's not going to be like 1 million subscribers on YouTube's. I just care about that we're having fun, that we're collaborating, that we're doing, and just, being free and being creative, being like, my 3-year-old son who finds joy in
Mhm.
Sonic the Hedgehog and making up games. Like I want to, enliven and embody that sense and feeling of play, even now as adults, and not have to worry about like, oh yeah, this is my side hustle. This is my grind. I have to
Mhm.
make that cheddar. I have to, you know, squeeze every penny out of a thing I love. And I just want to enjoy the thing I love, man. I don't have to make this to break this sort of thing.
Mhm. Oh no, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So as we're getting here into our final thoughts section of the show, I always like to just, ask the guest, what did you think of your time on the show? Any critiques and feedback, or just, anything that, it's your final thoughts. It's the final thoughts of this episode.
I had a lot of fun. I think that it's a great format, and I think that I will probably utilize similar methodologies for just creating like NPCs and locations moving forward.
Yeah.
Just because it's a nice little way to do it. I would say one of the outside of D&D, one of my favorite things for developing NPCs is actually from Cyberpunk. They have like a full life path system, and
Mm.
this gives me a lot of those vibes there of answering those questions and then being able to fill in the blanks of why. And NPC creation is always like the most fun part of DMing for me. So this is great.
Yeah, and I had the blessing and the privilege to be on an episode of Role Play Chat with Matt, and we talked about NPCs. And so I know, the big piece of advice I had on there, aside from, hey, if you're running campaigns with lots of NPCs, it's not a bad idea for you to share a Google Doc, or
Mhm.
rather a Google Sheet with your players, and
Yeah.
just fill in all the notes of your NPCs that you love. Because, you're going to make hundreds of NPCs together, and you're
Yeah.
not going to have a easy time necessarily keeping track of all of them. So that's a good tip, piece of advice. But also, I think some of the best NPCs are made in collaboration. So in a
Oh
setting
yeah.
like this, or, you're just talking with your players or just giving them permission, being like, okay, you go into a shop, you happen to know this shopkeeper. Who are they? Tell me who they
Yeah.
are. And then they just throw something at you. And then you're like, great, let me put this in the salad spinner and mix it up a little bit and throw something back at you. And you're like, and then they feel like there's that sense of connection and ownership, but also some surprise because now someone else has taken it and thrown it
Mhm.
back to them with a variation.
Yeah, one thing that I do in all of my campaigns is I have the system. I probably stole it from someone. I don't know who. So if you came up with it first, I'm sorry. But D&D is all about stealing from places. Is these things called Noah Guy cards, and I give every single one of my players a Noah Guy card for the
Yeah.
session, and they basically can come up with, if they're in a pinch. Oh, I know a guy who could help me out, and I'm like, okay, cool. How? And they feel like it's some like massive thing of like, oh, this is overpowered and I can choose someone, and I'm like, no, you're doing my writing for me, like
Mhm.
you're helping me with this collaborative effort, like it's completely worth it. I want you to feel invested. And that's, as you said, you can spend so much time trying to convince your players to be invested in characters that you created,
Mhm.
but the moment you put the ball in their court, like they just love them
Yeah.
so much more, and that gives them so much more investment in the game.
Not to mention, shameless self plug for the podcast at this point, but we've got over 140
Yeah.
episodes. So there's a lot of NPCs in this podcast that are free for you to use. I promise I'm doing my best to catch up on all the write-ups. So if you don't have time to listen to the episode or you don't use a transcription reader, I know like Apple Podcast automatically does like transcription reads, and I'm trying to do my best to include transcripts, but all that to say, there's a lot of NPCs. So if you're ever stuck and you need someone or you just want like a springboard of where to go off, well, I just hope that my humble resource of a podcast is good for you and you can, be inspired. And again, an idea of like a death tyrant chef beholder suddenly spawns a whole
Hmm.
multi-realm guild of chefs that all belong to it and affect your games moving forward. Or you have this bastion that you can get and introduce Thalara Solanis in your game, and this whole intrigue with unicorns and Voldemorts and all this other sort of stuff going on in your game.
Yeah, I like that.
Perfect. So I think the best way to round this episode out is to give the soapbox, the microphone, the stage, the platform to you. So anything you got to plug, where can we follow you on social media? What sort of projects do we need to be made aware of? And then if there's any passions or causes or anything that you want us to be made aware of, feel free to let us know.
Yeah, definitely. So the big thing for me is just follow me at Eating the Dungeon on most platforms, on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube. Those are the big ones that I post on. This year, I'm really making a push for more long form content. So the goal is at least one long form YouTube video every month, if not two. And then a bunch of shorts that will be coming up all the time on Instagram and TikTok as well. As far as anything else, just take a look for any published work that I'm going to be putting out for a lot more of the monsters when it comes to their write-ups. Everything that I make for the monsters and for the clonographies is edited in Homebrewery, is completely free to download. So please download it. Please use it for your tables. You don't have to ask permission. If you're going to publish it in other things, accreditation would be nice. But for kitchen table stuff, I'm a very firm believer that D&D is a game that is all about collaboration and about home brewing, about, home narrative writing. And so I don't want to lock anything behind a paywall. When I was a kid, as a teenager, that was what really drew me to D&D, is just that it really didn't take much other than some dice and some piece of paper. We didn't have to buy all these fancy things. And even now I'm still shying away from all the super fancy, things you can spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on to enhance the experience. Just give me some pieces of paper and some dice and we can play a game. So everything I make is completely free for that reason.
Excellent. Well, Marcus, Eating the Dungeon, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. I can't wait to have you back on making even more interesting NPCs.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon Music, Overcast, or YouTube, or feel free to save the RSS feed to use the app or player of your choice. Visit our website, sidekicksandsidequests.com, for links, write-ups of the NPCs, and to learn more about the show and the guests who have been on it. To stay up to date and interact via social media, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram/Threads, Twitter/X, and Reddit by searching for SideKQ Podcast. You can also find our small Discord community as well online. I would love to talk D&D and showcase your fan art, stories of how you used our NPCs, discussions, and commentary. And hey, if you'd like to hail the bard and send me a message, an email, you can do so by communicating with sidekicksandsidequests@gmail.com. To help this show be the resource it's meant to be, I ask that you leave a review on iTunes, 5 stars please, to help spread the word and share our podcast with your friends and family. Whether you're a veteran player or an aspiring dungeon master, there's something here for everyone, and I want to hear about it. As mentioned in the NPC creations section of the podcast, I do in fact have a Patreon for Sidekicks and Sidequests. If you love this podcast and what we're trying to do here, I would appreciate it if you would just go to the website, patreon.com/sidekicks and sidequests. No matter your lifestyle expenses, we have wonderful rewards at every level of Patreon membership tier. Modest, comfortable, wealthy, and aristocratic accommodations await, and we welcome all patrons to the Levitating Platter. Seriously, your financial support allows for this passion project to continue to invest in itself through the tools that will take our production to the next level, as well as provide more content for our patrons and the community at large. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you can.
Sidekicks and Sidequests is unofficial fan content permitted under the fan content policy.
Meaning I'm not approved or endorsed by Wizards.
Portions of the materials used are property of Wizards of the Coast.
Copyright Wizards of the Coast.
LLC.
Thank you for your support, and I'll see you at the pub next time.
Bar to rock on 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sidekicks and Sidequests.